My high school bully said, "You'll always be a loser." I just paid off her mortgage. Funny how life works out sometimes, isn't it? The words people throw at you when you're 16 can either break you or become the exact fuel you need to burn down their perfect little world 15 years later. Let me take you back to where it all began. Westlake High junior year. The hallways smelled like floor cleaner and desperation, and I was just trying to make it through each day without being noticed. Being invisible was my superpower back then, at least I thought it was until Heather Collins decided I was worthy of her attention. God, even thinking about her name now makes my stomach tighten. Heather fucking Collins. Blonde hair that caught the light in ways that seemed unfair, that constant smirk like she knew something you didn't, and parents who gave her everything except, apparently, a soul. You know the type, right? The girl whose dad bought her a brand new Lexus for her sweet 16, while the rest of us were catching the bus or driving hand-me-down death traps. The type who moved through high school like she already owned the world, and honestly, back then, she kind of did. I wasn't a complete nobody, but I wasn't somebody either. Middle-class kid on partial scholarship to a fancy private school where money was the real uniform. I was smart enough to be there, but not rich enough to belong. And Heather made sure I never forgot it. The memory that still burns the hottest happened during senior year. I'd applied for this prestigious summer internship at a tech startup. It was crazy competitive, but I'd been coding since I was 12, building websites for local businesses, teaching myself Python while other kids were playing video games. This was my shot to get noticed, to prove I could make something of myself. I'd made it to the final round of interviews. There were only 3 spots and 5 of us left. I remember walking into school that day feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were about to change for me. My acceptance email came during lunch period. I was sitting alone, refreshing my inbox every 30 seconds, when it finally appeared. The subject line, "Congratulations from Tech Future Internship Program." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely click to open it. I must have made some kind of noise, a gasp or something, because suddenly Heather and her little court were surrounding my table. I quickly tried to close my laptop, but she was faster. She snatched it away, her perfect manicured nails clicking against the keys as she read my private email out loud to everyone in earshot. Well, well, well. Looks like our little scholarship charity case thinks she's going to be the next Steve Jobs. I can still feel the heat that rushed to my face as everyone in the cafeteria turned to stare. The way my throat closed up. The way my vision tunneled until all I could see was her smug face. "Please give it back," I managed to whisper. But my weakness only fed her power. Her eyes scanned the rest of the email, hunting for more ammunition. $20,000 stipend? Wow. Almost enough to buy a decent wardrobe. Her friends laughed on cue like they'd rehearsed it. I stood up, trying to grab my laptop back, but she held it just out of reach. That's when Troy, her boyfriend and captain of basically every sports team that mattered, decided to join in. "Why are you even bothering? Everyone knows they only picked you to fill their diversity quota or whatever." The word stung because part of me wondered if they were right. Was I just a pity pick? A box they needed to check? "You should be thanking us," Heather continued, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "We're saving you from embarrassing yourself. People like you don't belong in places like that. You're just going to fail and come crawling back here anyway." And then came the line that would echo in my head for years to come, the one that would become both my poison and eventually my antidote. She leaned in close, her expensive perfume suffocating me, and said loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear, "Face reality. You'll always be a loser. It's just who you are." Then she dropped my laptop on the floor. The crack of plastic against tile seemed to silence the entire room for a beat. When I bent down to pick it up, I could feel dozens of eyes on me, watching, judging, pitying. The screen was cracked. A jagged line right across the middle like Heather had physically broken not just my computer but my future too. I didn't cry. Not there. I held it together long enough to walk, not run, because running would mean she won, to the nearest bathroom. I locked myself in a stall and pressed my forehead against the cool metal door, finally letting the tears come. I wish I could tell you I marched back out there, delivered some epic movie-worthy comeback, and walked away triumphant while everyone slow clapped. But real life isn't like that. Real revenge takes time, and planning, and patience. I skipped the rest of my classes that day. Went home and told my mom I was sick. In a way, I was. Sick with humiliation, with rage, with this new burning feeling that I couldn't name yet, but would later recognize as determination. That night, I taped up my laptop screen and wrote Heather's words on a post-it note that I stuck to my mirror. "You'll always be a loser." A daily reminder of who I never wanted to be and who I needed to prove wrong. The internship was everything I'd hoped for and more. I worked twice as hard as anyone else there, stayed later, came in earlier. The other interns went out for drinks after work. I stayed back learning from the senior developers. They saw potential in me that nobody at Westlake ever had. At the end of summer, I was the only intern offered a part-time position I could continue through college. My boss, a woman who'd built her company from nothing, told me she saw herself in me. Hungry, she called it. If only she knew what was really feeding that hunger. College was a blur of classes, coding, and the growing obsession with proving Heather wrong. I graduated early, summa cum laude, with job offers from 3 major tech companies. I chose the one with the highest starting salary and the best stock options. Not because I cared about the money, not yet anyway, but because success had become my only acceptable outcome. Work consumed me. While my college friends were dating, traveling, finding themselves, I was climbing. Each promotion, each bonus, each bit of industry recognition became another brick in the wall I was building between myself and that high school loser Heather said I'd always be. I barely went home during those years. My parents didn't understand my drive, my refusal to take vacations or come home for more than a quick Christmas visit. How could I explain that going back to that town felt like stepping back into a skin I'd shed? 7 years after graduation, my company went public. My stock options, the ones I'd never sold, not a single share, suddenly made me a millionaire at 29. On paper, anyway. That same week, I got the email about our 10-year high school reunion. The timing felt almost cosmic, too perfect to ignore. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to Google her name. Heather Collins. It took some digging. She'd married right after college, changed her last name, but eventually, I found her. Her Instagram was public, a rookie mistake. Picture after picture of her perfect life in our hometown. The big house in the nice subdivision. The 2 tow-headed children with her blue eyes. The handsome husband, not Troy, interestingly enough. The charity galas where she posed with other women who looked just like her. The vacation photos in the Bahamas, in Aspen, in wine country. But what struck me most was how ordinary it all seemed. How predictable. Heather had peaked in high school and simply coasted since then on her family's money and her husband's success. There was nothing remarkable about her life at all. I dug deeper. LinkedIn told me she'd never actually had a career. Her profile listed her as CEO of her own company, but a quick business search showed it was just a shell for her lifestyle consulting business that seemed to consist entirely of posting inspirational quotes against beach backgrounds. Public records were my next stop. The mortgage on that big house? Nearly underwater after they'd refinanced twice to maintain their lifestyle. His business? 3 tax liens in the past 5 years. Their perfect facade was just that, a facade. And just like that, my plan began to take shape. I didn't RSVP to the reunion. I wanted to be a surprise. Instead, I spent the next 3 months preparing. I lost 15 pounds, got my teeth professionally whitened, splurged on the kind of haircut that costs more than my first car, bought a dress that was engineered specifically to make people regret every mean thing they'd ever said to you. I also made a call to the bank that held Heather and her husband's mortgage. The night of the reunion arrived, and I sat in my rental car outside the venue, the same country club where Heather's parents had thrown her that legendary graduation party none of the scholarship kids were invited to. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. For a moment, I considered driving away. Was I really about to do this? Was I really still letting her control me, all these years later? But then I remembered the sound of my laptop hitting the floor. The crack in the screen that I'd had to look through for the rest of senior year because we couldn't afford to replace it. The way she'd said, "You'll always be a loser," like she was simply stating an obvious, immutable fact. I checked my purse one last time. The envelope was there, crisp and white and life-changing. I took a deep breath, opened the car door, and stepped into the warm summer night. Time to show Heather Collins exactly what kind of loser I'd become. The venue was exactly as tacky as I'd expected. Balloons in the school colors, a sad DJ playing the hits from our graduation year, and a cash bar serving overpriced well drinks to people desperate to numb the reality of returning to the scene of their faded glory days. I paused in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. The name tag table was to my right, a perky woman I didn't recognize sitting behind it with a stack of pre-printed badges. Name? she chirped, not looking up. I gave it to her, watching as her eyes widened slightly when she cross-referenced it with her list. "Oh, you weren't on our RSVP list. We're so glad you could make it." She handed me a blank name tag and a Sharpie. "You'll have to write your own." Perfect. Anonymity for just a little longer. I wrote only my first name, in handwriting deliberately different from my high school scrawl, and stuck it slightly off-center on my dress. Then I made my way to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and positioned myself in a dark corner with a perfect view of the entrance. I didn't have to wait long. Heather arrived fashionably late, of course, making an entrance like she was attending the Met Gala rather than a high school reunion in a town barely big enough to have its own Walmart. Her husband trailed behind her, looking bored already, checking his phone while she air-kissed and squealed her way through the crowd. She looked good. Not great, just good. The kind of good that comes from expensive skincare and strategic Botox rather than genuine happiness or fulfillment. I could see the strain around her eyes, the slightly too bright quality of her laugh. She was working way too hard to prove she was still the queen of this little kingdom. I sipped my drink and waited, watching as she made her rounds. She was meticulous, stopping to chat with everyone who had once mattered in our high school hierarchy. The other cheerleaders. The prom court. The guys from the football team who had gone slightly soft around the middle but still wore their championship rings. And then, inevitably, her gaze landed on me. I saw the moment of non-recognition, followed by squinting, followed by the slow dawn of realization washing over her face. She excused herself from whatever conversation she was having and made her way toward me, her smile fixed in place but curiosity burning in her eyes. "Oh my God," she said as she approached. "Is that really you? I almost didn't recognize you." That voice, still exactly the same. Still with that undercurrent of judgment wrapped in fake sweetness. My hand tightened around my glass, but I smiled back, easy and relaxed. "Heather, you look exactly the same." I didn't specify if that was a good thing. She laughed, tossing her hair back in that practiced way she'd perfected by 9th grade. "Well, you certainly don't. Look at you! You look different." Her eyes were calculating, trying to figure out what had changed. "Life's been good to me," I said simply. "I can see that. So what have you been up to? Where are you living now? Married? Kids?" The rapid-fire questions weren't out of genuine interest. She was fishing, trying to place me in her mental hierarchy, trying to figure out if I was still beneath her. I just smiled. "I've been busy. Very busy." I took another sip of my drink. "And you? Still in town, I take it?" Her smile faltered just slightly. "Oh yes. We love it here. David, my husband." She gestured vaguely toward a man chatting with former jocks by the bar. "He took over his father's insurance agency. We have the most gorgeous house in Lakeside Estates, and our twins are starting at Westlake Prep in the fall. Legacy admissions, you know?" I nodded like this was all very impressive. "How wonderful for you. Everything worked out exactly like you always said it would." Something in my tone must have alerted her that this wasn't going to be the typical reunion small talk. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her perfect features. "Well, you know me. I always had it all figured out." She laughed again, but it sounded hollow. "You certainly seem to think so," I agreed. "Including what would become of everyone else." The smile remained frozen on her face, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "Just that you always had such strong opinions about who would succeed and who would— How did you put it back then? Oh, right. Who would always be a loser?" And there it was. The moment of recognition, the slight widening of her eyes, the almost imperceptible step backward. She remembered. Her laugh turned nervous. "Oh my God, did I really say that? High school, right? We were all so immature back then. Were we?" I swirled my drink, ice clinking against glass. Or were some of us just showing who they really were? Heather's perfect smile faltered. She glanced around, probably looking for a convenient escape route. "Listen, if I ever said anything that hurt you, I'm sorry. Truly. But that was literally half our lives ago. 15 years, 2 months, and 17 days to be exact." I smiled at her shocked expression. "Just kidding. I don't actually count the days." That would be pathetic, right? But I wasn't kidding. I knew exactly how long it had been. Every milestone I'd hit, my first 6-figure salary, my first million in stock options, my first cover feature in Tech Innovator magazine, I'd calculated its distance from that day in the cafeteria. Not because I couldn't let go, but because I was building something. Something with Heather's name on it. "Anyway," she said, clearly uncomfortable, "I should probably circulate." So many people to catch up with. But we should definitely talk more later. She started to turn away, already dismissing me. Actually, I have something for you. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. A reunion gift of sorts. Curiosity won out over her desire to escape. She hesitated, then took it, her brow furrowing. What's this? Open it. She slid a manicured finger under the seal and pulled out the document inside. Her eyes skimmed it, not comprehending at first. Then she froze. Read it again. Her face drained of color so quickly I thought she might faint. This is our mortgage. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. How did you get a copy? Or pay it off? Because yes, that's what you're holding. Confirmation that as of last week, your mortgage has been paid in full. She stared at me, mouth actually hanging open. I'd never seen Heather Collins speechless before. It was everything I'd imagined. Why would you do this? Her voice was barely audible. I leaned in close, just like she had done to me 15 years ago in that cafeteria. Because I wanted you to know exactly what kind of loser I turned out to be. I walked away without waiting for her response, leaving her standing there clutching the proof that her family's largest debt had just vanished at the hands of someone she'd once deemed irrelevant. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I kept my pace measured, my back straight. Outside in the parking lot, I finally let myself exhale. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my rental car. I'd just spent $347,218.42 to pay off a stranger's mortgage. It was either the most badass power move of my life or the most expensive therapy session in history. Probably both. I drove straight to the airport that night, not even stopping to see my parents. I'd call them tomorrow, make up some excuse about a work emergency. They wouldn't question it. They were used to my absences, my priorities. As the plane lifted off, carrying me back to my real life, I waited for the feeling of satisfaction, of closure, to wash over me. I'd planned this moment for so long, envisioned it from every angle. The look on her face had been everything I'd hoped for. So why did I feel so empty? Revenge is supposed to be this cathartic, cleansing thing, right? You finally get back at the person who wronged you, and all those years of pain just wash away. At least, that's what movies and books had led me to believe. But as the weeks passed after the reunion, I realized something disturbing. Paying off Heather's mortgage hadn't freed me from her at all. If anything, it had strengthened her hold on me. Now, instead of plotting my revenge, I was obsessively monitoring her social media, waiting for some sign that my grand gesture had impacted her life. There was nothing at first. Her posts remained the same curated perfection: beach vacations, charity galas, the occasional inspirational quote about living your best life. It was like my financial nuke had never detonated. Then, about a month after the reunion, she posted a photo of her family in front of their house. The caption read, "So blessed to call this place home. A debt-free, blessed God is good." I nearly threw my phone across my apartment. God is good? God is good? I'm the one who fucking paid off your mortgage, Heather. Not God. M.E. That's when I realized the awful truth. My revenge hadn't been complete at all. In fact, it had backfired spectacularly. Instead of humiliating her, I'd given her a financial windfall that she was now attributing to divine intervention. I'd become the anonymous benefactor in her inspirational life story. I hadn't crushed her. I'd elevated her. The realization sent me into a spiral. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, started making mistakes at work that I never would have made before. My assistant found me crying in my office one afternoon, staring at Heather's Instagram, and gently suggested I might need to take some time off. She was right, though not for the reasons she thought. I didn't need rest. I needed a better plan. So I took a 2-week mental health break that my company's HR department had been practically begging me to use for years. I told everyone I was going to some exclusive wellness retreat in Arizona. Instead, I rented an Airbnb on the outskirts of my hometown and got to work. The problem with my first attempt at revenge was that it had been too clean, too anonymous, too easy for Heather to reframe in her narrative. This time, I needed something that would force her to confront who I was, what I'd become, and most importantly, who she really was. I started by learning everything about her current life. And I mean everything. Public records were just the beginning. I hired a private investigator, not the cheapest option, but after blowing over $300,000 on a mortgage, what was another few thousand for thoroughness? The PI dug up things even my tech-savvy sleuthing hadn't uncovered. Heather's husband David had taken out a second business loan just 3 months before I'd paid off their mortgage. Their credit card debt was astronomical, over $70,000 spread across 6 different cards. They were classic credit surfers, opening new cards with promotional rates, transferring balances, then repeating the cycle. They'd refinance their house twice, not just because of underwater value, but because they'd needed cash infusions to maintain their lifestyle. The twins were in private school on partial scholarship. Oh, the irony. And their tuition payments were consistently late. But the real gold came when the PI followed the money trail to a separate checking account in David's name only, funded by regular withdrawals from their joint account that Heather presumably thought were going toward their mountain of debt. Instead, David had been siphoning about $2,000 a month for over 2 years into this secret account. And where was that money going? To an apartment in the next town over. An apartment frequented by a 26-year-old dental hygienist named Amber. Classic David, couldn't even be original in his midlife crisis. I sat in my rented cabin, spreading all this information across the kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle. What to do with it? The obvious move would be to expose the affair, send Heather anonymous proof, blow up her marriage, watch the perfect facade crumble. But that felt too easy, too expected. And frankly, it made David the villain of the story when I needed Heather to remain center stage. No, I needed something more elegant. Something that would force Heather to see herself through my eyes. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to destroy Heather's life. I needed to buy it. I spent the next 3 days making calls, pulling strings, and transferring obscene amounts of money. By the end of the week, I owned the insurance agency where David worked. Not directly, of course. I created a shell company that acquired the parent company that owned the regional group that managed the local agency. It was convoluted enough to hide my involvement, but straightforward enough that I could exert direct control when needed. Next, I made an offer on the building that housed Heather's lifestyle consulting business, really just a single-room office in a strip mall where she occasionally met clients to discuss their brand identity or whatever bullshit she was selling. The landlord practically bit my hand off when I offered 30% above market value. Then came the masterstroke. Through another shell company, I purchased the majority debt held by the private school where Heather's twins were enrolled. Schools like Westlake Prep operated largely on endowments and donations, but they still carried operational debt, and debt could be bought and sold like any other financial instrument. With those 3 pieces in place, I essentially controlled the 3 pillars of Heather's existence: her husband's income, her pretend career, and her children's education. And she had no idea. The beauty of this plan wasn't that I would use this power to destroy her. It was that I wouldn't need to. Simply knowing I had this power would be enough to break her, to make her understand what true powerlessness felt like. But first, I needed to lay the groundwork for the reveal. It had to be perfect. It had to be public. And it had to be devastating. Looking at my calendar, I saw the perfect opportunity: the annual Westlake Prep fundraising gala just 2 weeks away. According to the PI's report, Heather was on the planning committee this year, desperate to cement her status among the school's elite parents. The gala would be her moment to shine, and my moment to step out of the shadows. I made one final call to the school's development director and made a simple proposal: a matching donation from my company for every dollar raised at the gala, up to $1 million. The only condition? I would attend personally to present the offer at the event. The director nearly wept with joy. They'd never had a potential donor of this magnitude before. Of course I could speak at the gala. In fact, they'd be honored to have me as their guest of honor. When I hung up, I felt a calmness settle over me that I hadn't experienced in 15 years. The pieces were all in place. All that remained was to execute the plan. The night before the gala, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my Airbnb, studying my reflection. I barely recognized myself, and not just because of the expensive haircut or designer clothes. There was a hardness in my eyes that hadn't been there before, a coldness. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider what I was about to do. Not just the mechanics of it, but the morality. Was I any better than Heather, using my power to make someone else feel small? Had I become exactly what I despised? But then I remembered the crack of my laptop hitting the tile floor. The words, "You'll always be a loser," echoing in a silent cafeteria. The years of doubt and insecurity and rage that had followed. This wasn't about being better than Heather. This was about balance. This was justice. I applied my lipstick, the same shade of red Heather had worn that day in the cafeteria, and nodded at my reflection. Tomorrow, the scales would finally be balanced. The Westlake Prep fundraising gala was even more ostentatious than I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling of the country club ballroom. Ice sculptures shaped like the school's mascot melted slowly on white-clothed tables. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that probably cost more than my first car mingled over champagne and canapes. I arrived deliberately late, making sure most of the guests were already there. The development director spotted me immediately, rushing over with the desperate enthusiasm of someone who smelled money. "Ms. Mitchell! We're so honored you could join us tonight." She grasped my hand in both of hers. "Everyone is simply buzzing about your generous matching offer. I've already had 3 major donors tell me they're doubling their planned contributions." I smiled, scanning the room over her shoulder. "I'm happy to support such a worthy institution. After all, education changed my life." Of course. May I get you a drink? Or perhaps introduce you to some of our board members?" "Actually," I said, "I'd love to meet your gala committee. I understand they've put together quite an event." Her face lit up. "Absolutely. They're just over there by the stage." She led me across the room, and there was Heather, holding court in the center of a group of equally polished women. She was wearing a blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her hair styled in elaborate waves. She looked every inch the queen bee she'd always been, until she saw me. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might pass out. She recovered admirably, though, plastering a smile back on her face as the development director made the introductions. "Ladies, I'd like you to meet Ms. Mitchell, CEO of Horizon Technologies, and our special guest tonight, Ms. Mitchell has graciously offered to match every donation up to $1 million. The women all made appropriate sounds of admiration and gratitude, all except Heather, who stood frozen, her champagne flute gripped so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Ms. Mitchell, this is our gala committee chair, Mrs. Collins." I extended my hand, smiling warmly. "Mrs. Collins and I are actually old friends. We went to high school together. Isn't that right, Heather?" She took my hand automatically, her palm cold and damp. Yes, we did." "How wonderful!" the director exclaimed. "Small world, the smallest." I agreed, not taking my eyes off Heather. In fact, Heather and I were just catching up at our reunion a few months ago. She was telling me all about her beautiful home and her children who attend this prestigious school. Heather's smile was rigid, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. "Yes, what a surprise that was? Seeing you again after all these years. A surprise indeed. Life takes us on such unexpected journeys, doesn't it?" I turned to address the rest of the group. Heather always knew exactly where she was headed, though. Even in high school she had such clarity about who would succeed and who wouldn't. I could practically hear Heather's teeth grinding behind her smile. "Ladies, would you excuse us for a moment?" I said smoothly. "Heather and I have so much catching up to do." Before anyone could object, I'd taken Heather's elbow and guided her toward a quiet corner of the ballroom. She came without resistance, probably fearing a scene more than whatever I might say to her in private. Once we were alone, she turned to me, her face a battlefield between rage and terror. "What are you doing here? What is this? First the mortgage, now this?" I took a sip of my champagne, savoring the moment. "I told you at the reunion, Heather. I wanted you to know what kind of loser I turned out to be." "So you're, what? Stalking me now? Inserting yourself into my life?" Her voice was rising, and she glanced nervously over her shoulder to see if anyone was watching. "Stalking implies I'm following you from a distance. What I'm doing is much more immersive." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I smiled. "It means I own you, Heather. Or rather, I own your life." "You're insane." "Am I? Let's see." I ticked points off on my fingers. "I paid off your mortgage, as you know. But did you know I also own the insurance agency where David works? And the building where your little vanity business rents space? Oh, and my personal favorite, I now hold the majority of debt for this very school where your children are enrolled." With each revelation, her face grew paler. By the time I finished, she looked like she might be sick. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's done. I own every significant aspect of your life, Heather. Your home, your husband's job, your business, your children's education, all of it." "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the gala. "Why would you do this?" I leaned in close enough to smell her expensive perfume, just like that day in the cafeteria 15 years ago. "Because I wanted you to understand something. I wanted you to feel what it's like to have someone else hold your entire future in their hands. To know that with a single word, they could take everything from you." Her eyes welled with tears. Are you going to destroy us? That, I said, straightening up and smoothing my dress, is entirely up to you. Her question hung between us. Are you going to destroy us? I studied her face, searching for the girl who had so casually shattered my confidence all those years ago. All I found was fear. Raw, unfiltered fear. Not so fun being on that side of the power dynamic, is it, Heather? I'm going to give you a choice, I said, keeping my voice level. The same choice you never gave me. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. I plucked 2 flutes, handed one to Heather, and clinked my glass against hers. 2 choices. She didn't drink. Smart girl. Finally learning some self-preservation. What do you want from me? Her voice had dropped to a whisper, her eyes darting around the room as if checking who might be witnessing her humiliation. Oh, the irony. I want you to understand what it feels like, I said simply. To have someone else holding all the cards. To know your entire life could come crashing down with a single decision that you have no control over. Her hand trembled, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her glass. I was a teenager. We were kids. Were we? Because I remember feeling very much like a child while you seemed so adult in your cruelty. So precise. So deliberate. I took a slow sip of champagne, letting the moment stretch. You knew exactly what you were doing, Heather. The development director appeared at my elbow, oblivious to the tension crackling between us. Ms. Mitchell, we're about to begin the formal program. Would you like to take your seat at the head table? Of course. I smiled graciously. Will Mrs. Collins be joining us? As committee chair? The woman beamed. What a lovely suggestion. Heather, you must sit with our guest of honor. Heather's smile was a brittle thing. I wouldn't miss it. As we followed the director toward the front of the ballroom, Heather leaned close enough that only I could hear. This is insane. You can't seriously expect to control my life. I already do, I murmured back. I'm just deciding what to do with that control. The head table was a prime spot facing the rest of the gala attendees. Heather's husband David was already seated there, along with the school principal and various board members. David stood as we approached, looking every inch the successful small-town businessman in his rental tuxedo. Honey, there you are, he said, kissing Heather's cheek. I was starting to think you'd abandoned me. God, even his voice was irritating. Exactly the kind of guy who peaked as Troy's sidekick in high school and had been riding that wave of remembered glory ever since. David, this is an old classmate, Heather said, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. She's our major donor tonight. Recognition flickered in his eyes as he extended his hand. The tech CEO? It's an honor. Thank you for your generous support of the school. I shook his hand, noting the slightly too firm grip of a man who thinks it conveys confidence rather than insecurity. The honor is mine. Heather was just telling me how proud you both are of your children. Twins, right? In 4th grade? His face lit up with genuine pride, the first authentic emotion I'd seen from either of them. Yes, Maddie and Max. They're incredible kids. I'm sure they are, I said, meaning it. Whatever I thought of their parents, the children were innocent. Children deserve every opportunity, don't they? Every chance to become their best selves. Absolutely, he agreed enthusiastically. That's why we sacrificed to send them here. Best education in the state. Heather shot him a warning look that he completely missed. Sacrifice, I repeated thoughtfully. Such an interesting concept. What we're willing to give up for what we truly value. Before David could respond, the development director tapped a microphone at the podium, calling the room to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please take your seats, we'd like to begin our program. I settled into my chair, hyper-aware of Heather's rigid posture beside me. This was it. The moment I'd been engineering for weeks. For years, really. The director welcomed everyone, thanked the committee, and rattled off some impressive statistics about the school's achievements. Then she got to the part I was waiting for. Tonight, we are extraordinarily honored to have with us someone whose generosity will transform what we can accomplish for our students. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of Horizon Technologies, Ms. Mitchell! The applause was enthusiastic, these people already mentally spending my money. I rose and walked to the podium, feeling strangely calm. In my peripheral vision, I could see Heather's white-knuckled grip on her napkin. Thank you for that warm welcome, I began, scanning the sea of expectant faces. Education has always been personal for me. I grew up not far from here, and I know firsthand how the right educational environment can change the trajectory of a young person's life. I paused, letting my gaze drift to Heather. And I know how the wrong environment can do just the opposite. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, completely misinterpreting my meaning. They thought I was talking about underfunded public schools, not the toxic social hierarchies of places exactly like Westlake Prep. I was fortunate, I continued. I had people who believed in me, who saw potential where others saw, well, let's just say less favorable things. I could practically feel Heather willing me not to say more, not to expose her in front of her carefully curated social circle. That's why I'm here tonight. To ensure that every child at Westlake Prep has the opportunity to be seen for who they truly are and who they might become. Not judged by their family's wealth or social standing, but by their character and potential. The crowd nodded approvingly. Who could argue with such a sentiment? To that end, I'm pleased to confirm that Horizon Technologies will match every dollar raised tonight, up to $1 million. Applause erupted, genuine excitement rippling through the room. I held up a hand to quiet them. But I'd like to add a specific designation for these funds. I want to establish a scholarship program for students who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford Westlake Prep. Students from all backgrounds, all walks of life. The clapping continued, though slightly more subdued from some corners of the room. The old guard never loved the idea of those people invading their exclusive spaces. And I'd like to name this scholarship after someone who taught me a valuable lesson about perseverance and proving people wrong. I paused, letting the suspense build. Heather had gone completely still in her chair. The Collins Persistent Scholarship. Gasps and whispers immediately broke out. All eyes turned to Heather, whose face had gone from white to crimson in seconds flat. Heather Collins was my classmate many years ago. I continued smoothly. And she taught me something I never forgot, that other people's expectations of you don't determine your future. Only you can do that. It was masterful, if I do say so myself. To everyone else in the room, I was paying Heather a compliment, honoring her with a named scholarship. Only she and I knew the truth, that I was publicly claiming my victory over her prediction, twisting her cruelest moment into a philanthropy photo op that she couldn't possibly object to without looking like an ungrateful monster. Heather, would you join me at the podium? I extended my hand toward her, my smile unwavering. The room burst into encouraging applause. Trapped by social convention and the expectations of her peers, Heather had no choice but to stand and make her way to the stage, her smile so forced it looked painful. When she reached me, I took her hand and squeezed it just a little too hard. Smile, I whispered. Everyone's watching. And they were. Every eye in the place was fixed on us. The successful CEO and the committee chair, old classmates reunited for a touching philanthropic moment. Camera phones were up, capturing what would undoubtedly be tomorrow's social media highlight for half the people in the room. I don't know what to say, Heather managed, her voice barely steady. That's all right, I said into the microphone. I have plenty to say. I turned to face her directly, still speaking for everyone to hear. Heather, you probably don't remember this, but in high school, you once told me I would always be a loser. It was a defining moment for me. The room went dead silent. Heather's smile froze in place. It defined me because I decided in that moment to prove you wrong. I was speaking to the whole room, but my eyes never left hers. So in a way, I have you to thank for where I am today. For the drive that built my company. For the determination that made me a success. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the heartwarming reunion story they'd been expecting. And now I get to prove you wrong in the most satisfying way possible. By using my success to ensure that no student at this school ever feels the way I did. That no child is ever judged by their economic status rather than their potential. I turned back to the audience, who seemed unsure whether to be inspired or uncomfortable. The Collins Persistent Scholarship will provide full tuition for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, with a preference for those who have faced bullying or social ostracism. Because sometimes the best motivation comes from proving someone wrong. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain. People were glancing at each other, trying to gauge the appropriate reaction. Was this an inspirational tale of overcoming adversity or an uncomfortable public call-out? I didn't care. This moment wasn't for them. Heather, I said, turning back to her, I hope you'll serve on the selection committee for this scholarship. No one understands better than you do how words can shape a person's future. She was trapped, completely and utterly trapped. To refuse would confirm every implied accusation. To accept would be to participate in her own public humiliation. The perfect revenge. I'd be honored, she said through clenched teeth. Wonderful, I beamed. And to launch this scholarship properly, I'd like to make an additional personal donation of $500,000, specifically in honor of Heather Collins. More confused applause. $500,000 bought a lot of goodwill, even if the delivery was bizarre. Now, I continued, I believe we're supposed to open the formal fundraising portion of the evening. Heather, would you like to take over? She looked like she wanted to murder me right there on stage, but she forced a smile and stepped up to the podium as I graciously moved aside. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for your unexpected generosity, she began, her voice only slightly shaking. Let's begin our pledge drive. I returned to my seat, sipping my champagne and watching Heather struggle through her prepared remarks. David leaned over to me, oblivious to what had just happened. That was so kind of you, he said, though I'm surprised Heather never mentioned you were classmates. She usually loves talking about high school. I'm sure I just wasn't memorable enough, I replied sweetly, until now. The evening proceeded with the typical fundraising rituals, the paddle raise, the silent auction, the overpriced wine flowing freely to loosen wealthy donors' wallets. Through it all, Heather maintained her composure with admirable effort, though I noticed she downed 3 glasses of champagne in quick succession. When the formal program ended and the band started playing, signaling the transition to the dancing portion of the evening, Heather made her move. She cornered me near the bar, her smile tight but her eyes blazing. Outside. Now. Not a request. I followed her through the French doors onto the terrace, which was mercifully empty as most guests were still finishing dessert inside. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of the country club's manicured gardens. The moment we were alone, Heather whirled on me. What the fuck was that? I leaned against the stone balustrade, the picture of relaxation. That was me making a generous donation to your children's school. You should be thanking me. Thanking you? Her voice rose dangerously. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. Did I? Most of them seem to think I was honoring you. You know exactly what you did. You took my worst moment and memorialized it with a $500,000 fuck you. I couldn't help but laugh. That's actually a pretty accurate description. Why? She was almost pleading now. Why go to all this trouble? The mortgage, the scholarship, buying the insurance agency. Don't forget your office building and the school's debt, I added helpfully. Why? She repeated, her voice cracking. What could you possibly get out of this besides some twisted satisfaction? I studied her for a long moment. The moonlight softened her features, making her look almost like the girl I remembered from high school. Beautiful, untouchable, assured of her place in the world. Let me ask you something, Heather. Do you remember breaking my laptop? She blinked, caught off guard by the question. What? My laptop. Senior year. You read my internship acceptance email out loud to the cafeteria, then dropped my laptop on the floor. Cracked the screen. Do you remember that? She frowned, genuinely searching her memory. Vaguely? I mean, I remember you got some internship that everyone was surprised about. Everyone was surprised about, I repeated flatly. And why was that, Heather? Why was it so shocking that I might achieve something? She had the decency to look uncomfortable. It was high school. Everyone was terrible in high school. No, Heather, not everyone. Just people like you who made it their mission to put others in their place. To decide who belonged and who didn't. Look, I'm sorry if I was mean to you in high school, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry. But this, she gestured wildly toward the ballroom, this is insane. This is not normal behavior. You're right, I agreed calmly. It's not normal to spend millions of dollars on an elaborate revenge scheme against a high school bully. It's completely disproportionate, arguably pathological. She stared at me, clearly not expecting me to concede the point. But here's the thing, Heather. What you did wasn't normal either. The level of casual cruelty you displayed, the absolute certainty with which you told me I'd always be a loser, that wasn't normal teenage behavior. That was a deliberate attempt to put me in my place, to establish your superiority. We were kids, she repeated weakly. No, you keep saying that like it's an excuse. But we were old enough to know better. Old enough to understand the impact of our actions. I straightened up, taking a step toward her. And now we're adults, and I have the power to show you exactly how it felt. So what happens now? She asked, her voice small. You own my life. What are you going to do with it? The million-dollar question. Literally. Now, Heather, you get to experience what I've lived with since that day in the cafeteria. Uncertainty. Insecurity. The knowledge that someone else has power over your future. For how long? I shrugged. How long did I feel like a loser because of what you said? How many years did your voice echo in my head every time I doubted myself? How many opportunities did I almost miss because I heard you telling me I didn't belong? Her shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in her expression. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to feel something. I want you to understand. Before she could respond, the terrace doors opened and David emerged, glancing between us with growing confusion. Everything okay out here? The headmaster is asking for both of you. They want to take photos for the press release about the new scholarship. Of course they did. The perfect cap to my revenge, a photo commemorating Heather's humiliation that would hang in the school hallway for years to come. We'll be right there, I said smoothly. Heather and I were just reminiscing about old times. David nodded and went back inside, clearly sensing the tension but choosing to ignore it. Heather turned to me, her expression a complex mix of anger, fear, and something else. Resignation, maybe. You've won. You've proven your point. I'm at your mercy. What more do you want? I considered her question seriously. What did I want? I'd spent 15 years building toward this moment, this position of absolute power over the person who had once made me feel powerless. I'd achieved everything I'd set out to do. So why didn't it feel like enough? I want you to go back in there, I said finally, and take that photo with a smile on your face. I want you to wonder every single day whether today is the day I decide to foreclose on your mortgage, or fire your husband, or raise the rent on your little vanity business office to an impossible amount. Her face crumpled, but I wasn't finished. I want you to live with the same uncertainty I've lived with. To question whether you're good enough, whether you belong, whether everything you've built could vanish in an instant because someone else decided you don't deserve it. For how long? She whispered again. Until I decide otherwise. The doors opened again, this time revealing the development director. Ladies, we're ready for you. I offered Heather my arm, like we were the oldest of friends. Shall we? She hesitated, then took it, her touch light as if she couldn't bear the contact but had no choice. Together, we walked back into the ballroom, where a photographer was waiting by a large ceremonial check bearing the name The Collins Persistence Scholarship, and the amount $1,500,000. Perfect! The photographer called. Mrs. Collins, if you could stand on the left of the check, and Ms. Mitchell on the right. Headmaster Peterson in the middle, please. We assumed our positions, Heather's smile so brittle it looked painful. Mine was genuine. This was exactly what I'd wanted. Proof, captured forever, of the moment Heather Collins realized she wasn't at the top of the food chain after all. Everyone say future leaders, the photographer called. Future leaders. Everyone chorused except Heather, whose lips moved but produced no sound. The camera flashed, immortalizing the moment. As we moved away from the display check, Heather pulled me aside one last time. This can't go on forever. What do I have to do to end this? To get you out of my life? I pretended to consider the question. Let me think. What would be a fitting conclusion to our little drama? Her eyes pleaded with me, all pretense of dignity gone. I know, I said finally. The next time you look down on someone, the next time you're tempted to put someone in their place, I want you to remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to be completely at someone else's mercy. And then I want you to make a different choice. That's it? She asked incredulously. A moral lesson? No, Heather. That's not it. That's just the price of me not destroying your life tonight. The rest? Well, that's for me to decide, isn't it? Day by day, moment by moment. I glanced at my watch. I should mingle with the other donors. Big night for fundraising, after all. Your children's education depends on it. I walked away, leaving her standing alone, the perfect picture of wealth and privilege on the outside, crumbling with uncertainty within. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and business cards pressed into my palm by people eager to connect with the wealthy tech CEO. I barely registered any of it. My focus remained on Heather, watching from across the room as she moved mechanically through her hostess duties, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. By the time I slipped out around midnight, the gala was still in full swing, fueled by open bars and the excitement of record-breaking fundraising. No one noticed my departure except Heather, whose eyes followed me to the door, a prisoner watching her jailer disappear. In my rental car, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd accomplished. 15 years of planning, of building, of measuring every success against Heather's cruel prediction, all culminating in this perfect moment of revenge. I'd done it. I'd won. So why did victory taste so much like ashes? I drove back to my Airbnb in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the echo of Heather's face in my mind. The woman who'd once seemed like a goddess to me, untouchable in her perfection, reduced to a trembling mess begging for mercy. It should have felt amazing. 15 years of working and plotting and waiting for this exact moment. It should have been fucking euphoric. Instead, I just felt empty. The cabin was dark when I arrived, the motion sensor light clicking on as I walked up the gravel path. I kicked off my heels inside the door, poured myself a generous whiskey, and collapsed onto the couch still wearing my gala dress. What now? That was the question I hadn't prepared for. I'd been so focused on the revenge itself that I hadn't really thought about the after. The rest of my life stretched before me, suddenly directionless. What do you do when you've achieved the one thing you've been working toward for 15 years? I took a long swallow of whiskey, letting it burn all the way down. The truth was, Heather Collins had shaped my entire adult life. Every career move, every investment, every sacrifice of personal relationships for professional advancement, all of it had been at least partially motivated by the need to prove her wrong. To show everyone that I wasn't a loser. And now that I'd done that, destroyed her in the most public, most elegant way possible, I had to face an uncomfortable reality. I'd given her power over me for 15 years. More power than she'd ever actually had in that high school cafeteria. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. Is this what you wanted? To ruin my life? Congratulations. You've succeeded. Heather, obviously. I considered blocking the number, then thought better of it. Having a direct line to her thoughts might prove useful, or entertaining at least. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Yes, ruining her life had been exactly the point. Except, had I really ruined it? I'd paid off her mortgage, established a scholarship in her name. Her social status in that small town was probably higher than ever, even if it was built on a foundation that could collapse at my whim. I hadn't destroyed Heather's life. I'd just made it uncertain, precarious, dependent on my goodwill, just as she'd once made me feel my future was dependent on hers. An eye for an eye, perfectly executed. So why did it feel so hollow? I took another drink, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. Photos from the gala were already appearing on social media, with Heather tagged in many of them. There we were, side by side with the giant check, her smile rigid with fear, mine radiant with victory. The comments were effusive, praising her for securing such an important donation, congratulating her on the scholarship named in her honor. The irony was almost too perfect. She was receiving adulation for her own humiliation. My phone buzzed again. Please tell me what you want. I'll do anything. Just let my family go. Let her family go? She made it sound like I was holding them hostage, though in a way I suppose I was. For the first time, a flicker of discomfort ran through me. Was I becoming the very thing I'd hated? The person who used power to make others feel small? I closed my eyes, trying to recapture the righteousness I'd felt during the planning stages. This wasn't the same thing. Heather had been cruel for cruelty's sake. I was delivering justice, wasn't I? The whiskey wasn't helping my clarity, but I poured another anyway. Outside, rain had started to fall, pattering against the cabin's roof in a soothing rhythm. I kicked off my shoes and curled up on the sofa, watching droplets race down the window panes. The next morning dawned gray and misty, my head pounding from too much whiskey and too little sleep. I made coffee, scrolled through more congratulatory emails from the school, and tried to decide what to do next. I had planned to extend my mental health break through the weekend, fly back on Sunday, and resume my normal life on Monday as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Go back to being CEO. Back to board meetings and product launches and the endless cycle of work that had defined my existence for so long. But something had shifted. The victory I'd imagined for 15 years had arrived, and it tasted different than expected. Not sweet. Not bitter exactly. Just complex. Another text from Heather. I haven't slept. David keeps asking what's wrong. Please just tell me what you want. What did I want? That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't respond, but I did something else. I opened my laptop and began researching. Property records, business registrations, financial statements. By noon, I had compiled a comprehensive document of all the ways I had inserted myself into Heather's life. Then I started making calls. By evening, everything was arranged. I picked up my phone and typed a response to Heather for the first time. Coffee. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Lakeside Cafe. Her reply was instantaneous. I'll be there. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table on the outdoor patio overlooking the small lake that gave the place its name. The morning was cool but clear, ducks skimming across the water's surface leaving rippling trails behind them. Heather arrived precisely at 9, looking like she hadn't slept in days. The designer clothes and perfect makeup couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes or the tight set of her jaw. She hesitated when she saw me, then squared her shoulders and approached like someone walking to their execution. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I ordered you a latte. You still drink those, right?" "I remember from the reunion." She sank into the chair, eyeing me warily. "Yes. Thank you. You look terrible." A flash of anger crossed her face, quickly suppressed. "What do you expect? You've been terrorizing me." "Have I?" I stirred my coffee calmly. "I paid off your mortgage, created a scholarship in your name. If anything, I've improved your life on paper. You know exactly what you've done," she hissed, leaning forward. "You're holding my entire existence hostage. My husband's job, my children's school, everything." I nodded, acknowledging the point. "True. And it's worked, hasn't it? You're afraid, uncertain, just like I was after you decided I'd always be a loser." She looked down at her untouched latte. "What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I was a horrible teenager and I did horrible things. Is that enough?" "Actually," I said, pulling an envelope from my bag and sliding it across the table, "I want you to have this." She stared at the envelope like it might contain anthrax. "What is it?" "Open it." With trembling fingers, she unsealed the envelope and pulled out the document inside. Her eyes scanned it, confusion gradually giving way to disbelief. "This is... You're transferring ownership of the insurance agency to David? And ... Releasing the lien on the school's debt? And ... Signing over all interests in your various properties and businesses back to their original owners," I finished for her. "As of this morning, I no longer control any aspect of your life." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why? What's the catch?" I leaned back in my chair, considering her question. "No catch. I've made my point. I've shown you what it feels like to be powerless, to have your future in someone else's hands. That was always the goal. So just like that, it's over? You torture me for weeks and then walk away?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Torture you for weeks? Heather, I've been planning this for 15 years. 15 years of working and studying and pushing myself, all with your voice in my head telling me I'd never make it. If anyone has been tortured here, it wasn't you." She had the decency to look ashamed. "I don't even remember saying that to you. That's the thing that kills me. It was just another day for me, but for you..." "That's exactly the point," I said quietly. "You casually destroyed my sense of self-worth without even noticing, without even remembering. That's what makes it so much worse." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years hanging between us. "So why let go now?" she finally asked. "Why not keep the power?" I gazed out over the lake, watching the ducks glide across the surface. "Because I don't want to be you." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I don't want power for power's sake," I continued. "I don't want to be the person who gets off on making others feel small. I just wanted you to understand how it felt. And now you do. So that's it? Lesson learned, game over?" "Pretty much." I finished my coffee and set the cup down with a soft clink. "You're free, Heather. Free to go back to your life, with your paid-off mortgage and your scholarship in your name. But now you'll remember, every time you start to judge someone, every time you're tempted to put someone in their place, you'll remember how it felt to be on the other side." She clutched the document, her knuckles white. "And you? What will you remember?" I smiled, genuinely this time. "That I'm not a loser. Never was. And that I wasted too much of my life trying to prove that to someone who never mattered in the first place." I stood, dropping cash on the table to cover our coffees. "Goodbye, Heather. Try not to ruin any more lives with your casual cruelty. You never know which one of your victims might turn out like me." As I walked away, she called after me. "What will you do now?" I paused, looking back over my shoulder. The question echoed my own thoughts from the previous night. What now, indeed? "Live," I said simply. "For the first time in 15 years, just live." And as I drove away from that small town for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd closed a chapter that had defined me for too long. Ahead lay something I hadn't anticipated. Freedom. Not just from Heather Collins, but from the part of myself that had needed this revenge to feel whole. My high school bully said I'd always be a loser. I paid off her mortgage to prove her wrong. But in the end, the person I really needed to convince wasn't her at all. It was me.